Thanks, MJ. Good evening, everybody. I call to order the regular board meeting of the Ridge-Niles School District 64 Board of Education for Thursday, February 11th, 2021. Carol, can you take roll, please?
Little.
Here.
Sotos. Biagi.
Here.
Pearl.
Here.
Salas. Here. Riles.
Here.
Sanchez.
Here.
Quorum present.
Great, thank you. The administration's asked us to go into closed session under Section 2C2 of the Open Meetings Act to discuss matters pertaining to collective negotiating and collective bargaining matters. Do I have a motion to go into closed?
So moved.
Thanks, Fred. Is there a second?
Second.
Larry, thank you for the second. Any discussion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote.
Okay, Biagi.
Yes.
Little.
Yes.
Salas. Yes. Pearl.
Yes.
Riles.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Motion carries. It's
Great, thank you.
31 p.m.
Okay, the board is back from closed session. It was in closed session this evening, starting at around a little after 6:30 p.m. Under Section 2C2 of the Open Meetings Act to discuss matters pertaining to collective bargaining. And we are now back at the public session of our meeting. And Carol, why don't we take roll one more time just before getting everything kicked off?
Riles.
Here.
Sanchez.
Here.
Pearl.
Here.
Biagi.
Here.
Salas. Here. Little.
Here.
Sotos.
Here.
Everyone is
Great.
present.
Great, thank you. Larry, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, I have no remarks this evening, so we're going to get started right into the agenda. We have a bit of a lengthy agenda tonight, so we'll start off with what we normally do at this point, and that is public comment on non-agenda items. I know, Natasha, we had one email prior to the meeting tonight. Did we have any more? Because I think we're going to take that one since it's specific to the pandemic. We're going to take that one during Dr. Olson's presentation.
Correct, and we do have one on non-agenda item.
Okay, then before you read that in, just as a reminder to the public, we take comments either on non-agenda items or on agenda items via the email address that's listed on the board website. You can also come in person. And this evening we move around for our meetings. Dr. Olson is at Field, and you can address the board in person at the microphone at Field School the entire evening. And again, as a reminder, due to COVID-19, it's prudent to have this meeting remotely instead of in person, but we are following all guidelines identified by the state. So I just realized we haven't done the other hearing, have we? So we should probably do that first before going into public comment. I apologize about that. May I have a motion to convene a public hearing on the resolution to authorize a permanent interfund transfer?
So moved.
Thanks, Denise. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Fred. Is there any discussion? Okay, and out to the public, is there any comments from the public? None. Dr. Olson, is there anyone present at the moment at Field?
There is not.
Rick,
I'll
we
keep
need
asking.
to adjourn. You need to adjourn the meeting to go into the hearing.
I do, don't I? Okay,
Yes.
well, then we'll go back. And do you want to rescind, Fred, your second?
Yes. I'll rescind
Okay, and Denise, do you want to rescind your motion?
I do.
Okay, so we are going to adjourn the open meeting right now. Tony, do I need a roll call vote on that? I do. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn the open meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Tom. Fred's got the motion. Why don't we take a roll call vote on that?
Little.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Pearl.
Yes.
Riles.
Yes.
Salas. Yes. Sotos.
Yes.
Biagi.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, now may I have a motion to convene a public hearing on the resolution to authorize a permanent interfund transfer?
So moved.
So moved.
I'm going to take them in order again. Denise and Fred, do you want the second again?
Yes.
Yay. Okay, thanks. Any discussion on that? Okay, and anything from the public? Okay, why don't we take a roll call?
Pearl,
Yes.
Sotos,
Yes.
Little,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Dallas, yes, Biagi,
Yes,
Riles,
yes,
motion carries.
thank you. Let the record reflect that this is the public hearing conducted by the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District Number 64, Cook County, Illinois, pursuant to Section 17(2)A of the School Code. For the record, the board is considering a resolution to authorize a permanent interfund transfer of $2 million from the Education Fund to the Operations and Maintenance Fund, and then to the Capital Projects Fund of the district. On January 14th, 2021, notice of tonight's public hearing was published in the Park Ridge Herald Advocate and the Niles Herald Spectator. Notice of this hearing was also posted at the district's Educational Service Center. At this time, does the administration have any comments? Luann or Dr. Olson?
No comments at this time.
Thank you. At this time, do any of the members of the board have any comments? Okay, and are there any comments from the public? None. Seeing none. Are there any more comments or clarifications from the administration or the board?
No.
May I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing on the resolution to authorize a permanent interfund transfer and return to regular session?
So moved.
Thanks, Fred. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Denise. Any discussion from the board on adjourning? And anything from the public? Okay, take a roll call.
Little,
Yes.
Sotos,
Yes.
Riles,
yes.
Pearl,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Dallas, yes, Biagi,
Yes,
motion carries.
thanks, Carol. All right, now with that complete debacle of procedure for this evening, we're back to public comment on non-agenda items. So I think I was finishing up everything I said with regard to public comment and how the public can comment right now. And so I think we had one email that came in that is on non-agenda items. And then again, I'll go out to Dr. Olson. We'll read that first and I'll go out to Dr. Olson to see if anyone has shown up for non-agenda.
Okay, I shall proceed. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
This comment is from Ralph Shelovitsky. These are two public comments combined into one from me and my wife, Margarita Mora. We are parents of a fifth grader at kindergartner at Franklin. Our fifth grader attended full-day kindergarten at Norwood Park Elementary, and she was well prepared when she entered first grade at Franklin. On the other hand, our kindergartner attends a half-day program at Franklin and essentially started the year with 3 different substitute teachers, some of whom were not properly trained or supervised to deliver a quality education, despite going through District 64, D64, onboarding and training. We painfully witnessed a disastrous start to her formal education live on Zoom. For the last 3 board meetings, District 64 administrators talked about the shortage of subs, and the solution was to engage 2 staffing agencies and raise the pay. While this may have helped increase the pool of available subs, the reality is that some subs lack the training and supervision necessary to deliver a quality education. Here is a quote from a teacher's email. There is a substitute for students who are in school, but this sub does not have access to Google Meet, which is our usual substitute live meeting platform. For students who are learning remotely tomorrow, January 20, 2021, all lessons will be done asynchronously. How is it possible that months into the school year, we are encountering issues with the sub not even being able to log in to teach? Today, we had another example where my kindergartner had a sub to allow the classroom teacher to perform individual testing. It was clear that the sub had not been adequately trained before being placed in a classroom. It took multiple teachers live on Zoom to train her on the basic use of remote learning tools such as screen sharing and mute. Why does D64 continue to send subs with inadequate training to our classrooms? We have other examples, some of which we have shared with Dr. Olson and Mr. Biaggi in past emails. While the reoccurring issues with the subs is not the main purpose of this letter, the full school board needs to be aware that this has been a concern for months and something needs to be done to correct this problem. The purpose of this letter is to voice our opinion as parents regarding D64's search for the third principal for Franklin within a 5-year period. Unlike other school districts that are more engaging with the parents, we have not been surveyed in regards to the new principal search. As far as we know, the only involvement for Franklin families will be through some parents asking prescribed questions to the final candidates at the committee before presenting these candidates to the school board for approval. Here are some behavioral questions you should really consider asking your candidates during your selection process. Tell me about a situation when the school district did not provide the resources necessary for your students to be successful. What did you do to try to remediate the problem? Tell me about a situation where multiple parents complained about the same issue and what was your approach to resolve the problem? How would you engage teachers who have seen multiple principals in the last 5 years reshuffle staff and make changes only to see that principal leave and have the process start all over again? How would you get teachers buy-in to your changes when they're probably fatigued by constant change? We hope D64 hires an experienced principal who will lead Franklin for many years to come. A collaborative leader who understands the community, parents, teachers, and student body. A principal who makes good use of technology at the classroom level. Franklin needs a principal who invests their time to see firsthand what the parents, students, the crossing guard, etc., experience during pickup and drop-off times. For example, snow removal, a need for a crosswalk, and speeding school buses. Someone who is proactive and inspires confidence. It is a must for Franklin to have a leader with a proven track record. As you select the third principal within 5 years, you must recognize that now is not the time to hire a rookie without any prior experience as a school principal. The teachers and the students need stability and experienced leadership at Franklin. That concludes the public comment.
Thank you. And there's no other emails that have come in?
Not at this time.
Okay, Dr. Olson, anyone present for non-agenda items at
No.
Field? Okay. All right. At this time, are there any additions, deletions, or modifications to the agenda from the board as is presented tonight? Okay. And Dr. Olson, we have a recognition to do this evening.
We do. Dr. Dwyer from Roosevelt is actually sitting right next to me, and Tim Gleason from Lincoln. Both of them headed up the community fund as they have the last handful of years, and I think they have some really good news to share with us tonight, so I'll turn it over to them.
Great. I hope everyone's able to hear me okay.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to be here. Despite this cold and snowy evening, we do have some great news to share with everyone. District 64 participated in the annual Park Ridge Community Fund Drive this past fall, and we raised over $12,000 to support 29 different local community agencies. This effort was made possible by our teachers and staff, and even retired District 64 staff contributed to our fund drive. This fall and winter, we overcame many challenges, obviously trying to conduct this during a pandemic, but we also had to overcome the challenges that there really were no raffle prizes to be offering to donors. So we just encourage people to give from the heart. And our teachers and staff, our retired teachers and staff really stepped up and contributed such an enormous amount of money. I'm really happy to co-chair this drive with my colleague, Tim Gleason, and Tim may join on and extend some thank yous and provide some more information about our successful drive as well. Tim?
I just want to say thank you to all the District 64 staff members, retirees, who put forth money this year towards the community fund. We know that a lot of nonprofits budgets are down to almost half of what they've normally been. And many of the nonprofits locally that support our families, our kids, whether it be through a variety of different reasons, they rely on a lot of these local social service agencies. So we're just very proud that we could raise the money that we did this year. And it was actually as important this year as any year has ever been, with a lot of people out of work and those sorts of things. So I just am really just proud of our District 64 staff and retirees. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin and Tim. We appreciate your hard work and all the hard work of your representatives at all the schools. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you both on behalf of the board as well. Great job, as always. Okay, Dr. Olson, as we've done for the last several meetings now, I don't think all the way back to March, but we've been trying to give a pandemic update as it relates to District 64. So tonight is no exception.
Yes, and there's a lot to share, a lot of updates since our last meeting. So first of all, as the board knows, and we shared with the community, we were very fortunate to be able to receive the vaccine for our staff. They have all received the first dose and are receiving the second dose next week. In terms of percentages, we were able to administer the vaccine to 78% of the staff. If I count in those staff members who have gone on their own and have received it individually, we're probably around 80%. The reason for staff that they might have not gone is because A, either that's their personal choice, B, they were currently quarantining at the time and we didn't want them to come back in the school, or they had a certain medical condition where their doctor was advising them not to do so at the time. We're very excited to be able to provide these doses, and I think that the staff feels very relieved to have this opportunity, and we look forward to having us vaccinated by the end of next week. So that is all good. The board may have heard that yesterday the CDC just came out and said that if you've received the vaccine, you no longer have to quarantine. So up until that announcement, all the information we had received is that we do still have to follow the quarantine until even if you did receive the vaccine. So while the CDC has said this, now we need to wait for the Illinois State Board to say it, or the Illinois Department of Public Health, and then that needs to trickle down to Cook County, and then that comes to us. So as of this moment, although that's been shared, we need to still follow the guideline of asking people to quarantine for 2 weeks, regardless of whether they've had the vaccine or not. In terms of antigen testing, which is kind of the fast test for determining whether somebody is positive or not. If you remember, we've been talking for several months now about looking into these possibilities of bringing it to District 64. As I shared with the board before, this was a very expensive venture for districts, which is why not many of them chose to go down this road. But right after we returned after winter break, then we started hearing of opportunities where the district would not have to pay for the tests and that we would still have to pay something, but nowhere near what we would have paid. So I started pursuing those opportunities. And as soon as information came out about us starting to receive the vaccine, all districts that were pursuing that immediately dropped. That it just doesn't seem to make sense at this point, since we've gotten this far, that we would need to be able to pursue it any longer. In terms of if we had, what a lot of districts would do is do it either for their staff only or only for staff and students. So this was never intended to be like something provided to the community. It's sort of more for what we're working through internally, and we are no longer pursuing it at this time. But obviously, if something were to change, then we still have all of that research and material. In terms of travel, once again, we are following the IDPH's recommendation that anybody who travels outside of the United States or outside the state of Illinois, that when they come back, it is the recommendation that they quarantine for 14 days. I've started to receive some questions of, are we going to take an adaptive pause after spring break like we did for Thanksgiving break and winter break? And the answer is that at this time, we will not have an adaptive pause. School will continue on before and after spring break. What we do need to consider here is the fact that our metrics right now are very different than where they were in November and December. And that was driving a lot of those decisions at the time. Secondly, there was the concern that with the Thanksgiving and winter break holidays that we were going to have a lot of staff and families travel. And a lot of people felt that this was very directed to their family or their family traditions or their desires to be with family at those special times of the year. So we were very conscious of that. We don't feel that that's related into spring break in the same way, which is why we're not considering it at this time. We do ask that all staff and families don't travel, but I also realize that that's an individual decision for each family to make, whether you're a staff member or a parent. And so, we will work with the situation as it comes about to ensure that we have coverage if there are people that are needing to quarantine when they return from a travel. If this does hold true and we do not have to quarantine after someone has received the vaccine, this will be a massive game changer for us because a lot of what we're having to do with substitutes right now has to do with the amount of people that have to quarantine out of caution. And if we no longer have to do that, that's going to significantly reduce the need for substitutes as much and that level of concern. So we are excited about that. Basically, all districts right now are asking the question, when is it safe to bring kids back full time? So all districts are talking through this right now. As a step in that direction, what I asked each building to be able to determine is by February 1st, determining once they know how many kids are in hybrid and how many kids are in remote learning for the month of February, would it be possible for us to bring everybody back in person and still maintain 6 feet? And what we found is the answer is no. There are pockets where maybe at a school, 1 grade level might be able to do it or 2, but then those grade levels aren't even the same across the district. And so it is mostly the fact that we would not be able to do it. So then that kind of leads to the next question of, well, what if we reduce the 6 feet? If we reduce the 6 feet, then that would allow more kids to be able to come and we could do it that way. So that's the next task that we're working on with the buildings right now, is kind of figuring out, what if it was 5? What if it was 3? What if it was 2? And determining where those pieces are so that we can use that to inform our decisions as we go forward. As in the form of an update on the Pandemic Advisory Committee, I think I shared that 2 meetings ago, we had talked about several aspects of our plan and had the committee rate on a continuum where they believe we should be on each of those. And at that time, what was said overwhelmingly by the committee is that they wanted to maintain the 6 feet. We only had one member who said that they would not follow any social distancing at all. Last night, we met again at the Pandemic Advisory Committee and again talked about it and specifically voted on whether we could reduce the 6 foot. Once again, we had 11 out of the 13 people vote to maintain the 6 feet, and we had 2 people vote that we could reduce it and that would be fine. However, everybody on the committee was in agreement that if the guidelines change, then they're open to changing their opinion on that. And really what a lot of the conversation was is that they feel that we should be sticking to the guidelines or sticking to the science. But if that science changes, then they're all ears for listening to what that new guidance is. We are still waiting to hear if there's going to be a federal response. We've been hearing that the new administration was going to have some new plans about how to get all kids back in school. We've been waiting to see if there's going to be new guidelines that are going to come out from the federal level. We even heard rumors that that was going to happen this week, but it has not yet happened. But hopefully, that will be coming soon because that could potentially have an effect on our plans and where we might go from there. Another question that I'm starting to receive is, will there be a remote learning option in the fall for parents if we come back full time? And while we haven't made any final decisions on that, where I am right now is that I am strongly considering that that's going to be something we're going to need to do. And this is based on, some of the conversations that I've had or principals had or teachers have had with some of our parents who feel that until there is a child vaccine, they're not comfortable sending their child to school. And so I do think it's going to be important for us to still provide this opportunity. However, if we did provide it, we would set it up so that if you're in remote learning, then your teacher is only teaching remote learning. And if a teacher is in person, they're only teaching in person. So what this might mean is if you have a second grader, they might be with other second graders across the district, all in that same remote class, since they won't be coming to school or participating in any of those pieces. When we talked with the Pandemic Advisory Committee about that, they were unanimous in their recommendation that we do offer this next fall. One of the pieces that we talked about is, whenever we come up with good ideas, it's like, yes, let's just do it. But just understanding that there's only so much money to work from. So if we decide to offer remote learning, that might prevent us from hiring additional intervention teachers to work with struggling students. So, there is give and take in terms of those decisions, but they still felt strongly that it still should be offered. So while I'm strongly leaning in that direction, we still have not yet made a final decision, but I realize that that needs to come soon as parents are wanting to plan. And then lastly, in terms of the Pandemic Advisory Committee, we also talked about the idea of starting to mix kids more, that we're being very conservative in making sure that the students that one student interacts with are, for the most part, the same students all day long. There are a couple of exceptions to those, but we were looking to whether we were going to expand on that. And the way the committee felt right now is the focus should be on getting kids in school, worry about the mixing them later. That, all the efforts need to be focused there. And they did not find that the mixing of, additional groups was something we should be spending time on at this time. So those are the current updates that I have in regard to COVID. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions from the board before? I know we do have at least one public comment, and we may have received more during Dr. Olson's presentation. But before I do that, any questions from the board for Dr. Olson? Okay, Natasha, do you mind reading that, at least the one that I know we received?
I only have the one for now.
Great.
This comment is from Craig Murray. According to the district, the majority of staff received the first dose of the vaccine and are on the path to receive the second vaccine before the end of the month. What planning has taken place to move to a full schedule of 5 days of in-person learning this school year? If full in-person school will not be implemented for this school year, even though staff will be vaccinated, please state what reviews the board or school district has conducted of comparable districts that currently have full 5-day-a-week in-person learning. Specifically, address if you have reached out to Wilmette District 39 or other districts to review how they have accomplished full in-person learning 5 days a week this school year. Please address what differences are there between our district and theirs. Average school class size, room size, funding, teachers union contract, etc. And if you do not have this information, please present an analysis of specific reasons why other districts have accomplished full in-person learning this school year, and ours has not or will not, even though our staff will soon be vaccinated. Regards, Craig Murray, parent of 2 children in D64 and alumnus of D64. That is the
Thanks.
only comment.
Great, thanks, Natasha. Dr. Olson, I assume you'll reach out to that individual.
Yes.
Great. Any comments from the public in person? Anyone there?
There's nobody here.
Okay, and I'll just turn it back to the board one more time. Any other questions, comments from the board on this before we move on? Okay, thanks, Dr. Olson, for the
Thank
update.
you.
We're moving on to the next agenda item, which is the presentation of the annual audit report. And I know Luann and Valerie are going to handle this for us. I just want to say one thing before we go to the audit report, and that is that I think it was, Luann, it was a couple of years ago now where we had a little skirmish at the board level about this, about how, what this presentation was this evening and the sort of formality of it. And what was decided a couple of years ago at the board level was, rather than the board formally adopting the report, because I believe the year that this came up, there was a difference of opinion from your office versus what was in the report, and there was a question as to whether we were adopting the report, you know, with that, what we perceived to be inaccuracy or error, whatever it was in there at the time. And instead, we looked into this and sought the advice of counsel on this, and it was decided that the board would, rather than formally adopt it with a vote, that it satisfied the statute for us to just be presented with the audit report as is, and that we don't have to take a formal vote per se, that what you're doing tonight will satisfy the legal requirements under the statute. Tony, did I get that right?
Yes, you're correct, Rick, and you have a good memory. I hope you have a good memory for the test that Val has for all of you on the audit later.
No, that I don't have.
I would like to introduce Valerie Barhala. She's our Director of Business Services. She basically is in charge of pretty much the majority of the finances in the district. She oversees our payroll and AP department, and as the individual that oversees most of our finances, she is in charge of our audit. So I asked her to present the audit to the board tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Val.
Hello, thank you. You all should have received the audit packet. I would like to point out that the audit we are reviewing covers the 2019-2020 fiscal year, which occurs from July 1st of 2019 and ends June 30th of 2020. The district is required to have an independent external audit review of its financial every year to determine risks and deficiencies. So that is what this is for. Important thing to point out is we had the audit done by Whipley, which merged with Klein Hall, who was our previous auditors. So it's just a company change. Our staff of accountants on our and CPAs on our accounts stayed the same. Included in your packet, you will find 3 things: the audited financial statements, required communication letters, and the ISB annual financial report. The objective of the audit is basically threefold. The first is to gain an understanding of the district's financial processes and controls in order to identify risks, in order to properly plan relevant auditing procedures, examine the district's financial records for possible errors or irregularities in account balances, and review selected major funds, grant programs for compliance with rules and regulations, and report the data of the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. District 64 received an unqualified audit opinion for the 1920 year. This indicates that the financial statements prepared by the business office are free of material misstatements and fairly represent the district's financial condition. More specifically, the auditors did not propose any material adjustments for the district's June 30th, 2020 balances. The auditors utilized required communication letters to describe the audit results in more detail, which those are the letters that you have. The first letter, titled Report on Internal Controls over Financial Reporting and on Compliance and Other Matters, indicates District 64 has no internal control weaknesses or deficiencies being reported to the state of Illinois. This is the 9th consecutive year the District 64 has no reportable findings. The second letter, titled Communication with Those Charged with Governance, summarizes the auditor's responsibilities and any unusual matters encountered during the audit. The auditors did not highlight anything out of the ordinary. The third and final letter, entitled Management Letter, lists any minor recommendations from the auditors that are mentioned for the district's internal considerations, but are not severe enough to warrant reporting to the state. The auditors made no recommendations for the 1920 year. The district will once again receive financial recognition from the state of Illinois for the 12th consecutive year. I would like to thank all departments involved in the auditing process and their continued high standards and internal controls accuracy.
Thank you. Are there, first, I mean, even though we're not going to be voting on this tonight, I am going to see if there's public comment on it as well. But first, we'll go to the board. Are there any questions from the board to Valerie on what we have in the report on the audit?
Not a question, but just a comment. I know there's some comments about this is not pertaining to the audit, it's on the audit, is the cost of remote learning or hybrid learning. And it's just, I mean, as far as what the audit has, 68% of our expenses for instruction are consistent, no matter if we're remote or in person or hybrid. And so that's a big part of our budget that doesn't change.
Correct. One thing, Rick, if I can point out that was we found out late this afternoon is that on the state's ADA report for 2020, because of March 2020 being when the pandemic started, how they did the ADA is, I don't know what word to use, wonky. They have our ADA reported at over 10,000 for the month, and we don't even have 10,000 students. So I've asked Carrie Meredith, who's in charge of that, just to check with the state, because I think they're not going to correct it. But what it does do is it makes our ADA look way higher than prior years. So when Val and I look at the expenditure per pupil, it went down over $1,000 per pupil. So then when we see that, we start digging immediately because that's such a huge variance. So I just want the board to be aware of that. So if you're out and about, anyone asks, why did the amount we're spending per pupil go down over $1,000? It is because of how the ADA was calculated in March 2020 due to the pandemic.
Is wonky a technical term they teach you in finance?
I don't know. I was trying to think if that was in the book. I can't remember exactly. It may have been in chapter 5.
In law school, they have a class just for like big fancy words that they make us learn. So
I actually learned that word from MJ.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
It is a Luann word.
Wonky.
Yes.
You've heard it before then.
Yes.
He doesn't usually like to hear it because
right.
It's not good news usually.
So I know, Luann, when we've over the last couple of years since we started, shifting focus on SPED in the district, we've had a lot more data that's pushed out to the public on this. I assume that issue is going to get reflected in some of that data as well too when we update the special ed data.
Yes. Yeah, we'll update all it. So we have updated everything right now as far as the audit and the AFR, and Val's working with Pete on updating our website to make sure everything is completely updated.
But will we reflect that specific ADA kind of wonkiness on there? Or can we? Is there a way we can asterisk it?
I just want to ask, well, we're going to asterisk it on our financial report that Val does. So that will be asterisked on there, and anywhere else that we can, we will definitely do that. But Leanne, I don't think it's going to affect our special ed count, do you?
I don't know that it'll affect special ed count. I'm concerned about Mo though.
So that that is something that Val works on with Leanne. So that is that reporting back to the state. So if
Yep.
we see that on there, then we will, see what we can do. When we had an issue, if you guys remember a few years ago when we were doing the special ed audit and looking at the finances, ISB had made a mistake on the number of our special ed students. When we tried to get them to change it, they would not change it. So we'll see what it looks like when we get the MO. I know you guys just did MO, didn't you? Maintenance of effort. Yeah, and didn't you just do it?
No, we did excess cost.
Oh, okay. So since we're aware of it now, we'll be very careful when we look at our maintenance
Yep.
of effort.
And I only brought it up because point well taken that if it looks weird on this, I think there's going to be some parents who are going to question why all of a sudden are we spending less money per pupil.
Well, and then the opposite
we're
is going to
not.
happen next year because it's going to go
Right.
way back up, and then people
right.
are going to go, what did you do? So I just
Right.
I know you guys see lots of people out in the public and people pick up different pieces of information. So I just want you guys to have that in your back pocket.
Luann, have you heard of other districts, this same thing happened with them?
I haven't, her and I were working on it today and found it. I haven't reached out, but we will reach out to our IASBO community. We do have a place where we can post questions and just see what other districts' feelings are. And we will have Carrie, she'll be contacting the state just to see if they're going to leave it like that or, how it should be handled. I'm sure if ours is like that, everyone's is like that.
Yep. Larry, it looks like you might have a question.
Well, I have a thought. So it says we have roughly 10,000 children in the district. So this number rides to the state all the way up to the federal. Am I looking for you to get several telephone calls along the way?
We probably are going to be questioned about our ADA anywhere that it's used, especially if it's outside of the state of Illinois. So for instance, it is used in our audit. So that's how we caught it. And so if the state is going to leave it the way it is, then that will have to be an asterisk or explained to anyone else. But when we're looking at like our Title I money, we're looking at our number of low income students. So it's not affecting that. And our IDEA money that comes through Leanne is looking at our special ed students.
So you're going to have to put a red phone on your desk?
Larry, I've been trying to get one for years.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the board on the audit? And Natasha, anything come in while we were presenting this?
We have not received any comments, no.
Okay, and Dr. Olson, anyone present?
No.
Nope. Okay. Well, Valerie and Luann, thank you for the presentation and for all the work on that.
It is a lot of work for Val.
Yes, it is.
Thank you,
Yes,
Val.
it is. Thank you. All right, now we're moving on to the resolution of which I botched earlier this evening. So we're actually going to formally adopt this right now. So we have an action item, and Luann, is there anything, I mean, I know this is kind of, it's already been sort of done, but do you want anything you want to comment on before we move to the action item?
No, I haven't got to the report yet. I think it's 207 pages in. Just from memory, a couple things. One, if you'll note, I did put on the report that we have transferred $25 million out of our operating funds to pay for construction. So kudos to the board for having, the strength to do that. We are moving the 2 million. We are not done quite paying for the Washington work. I have a couple more pay applications, so we may need a little bit more money. We're also paying the architect out of the capital projects fund. So because we're going to be moving the money, so we're not paying him an O&M and then going to reimburse O&M. We're just paying him out of capital projects. So we may be bringing back before June 30th another resolution, but for a smaller amount, because I think the other one you should do, we could do it this year because we do have the authority and the budget to do it out of O&M, or Val could bring it back in July, like as a first thing that you'll move that money for the construction project done at Carpenter School.
Okay. Well, we have an action item and a motion on this. Why don't we take that and then we can see if there's any discussion.
Fred, you're muted.
Yep. There you go. Well, now you're still muted. Nope, nope.
There we
There
go.
you go. There you go.
Action item 21-02-1. I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve resolution number 1264, directing the transfer of $2 million from the Education Fund to the Operations and Maintenance Fund and into the Capital Projects Fund of the district.
Second.
Rebecca, was that you? Great. So Fred had the motion, Rebecca had the second. Is there any discussion on this from the board? Okay, and anything from the public, Natasha or Dr. Olson?
No.
Nothing.
Okay, take a roll call vote.
Sotos,
Yes.
Biagi,
Yes.
Salas, yes. Little,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Pearl,
Yes.
Riles,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thanks, Carol. All right, we're on to an always fun conversation that we have every year with preliminary enrollment projections, and Luann and Dr. Martin are going to present this tonight.
Joel, do you want me to talk about the projections first?
Sure, if you want to.
Okay, so I'm going to just talk briefly and turn it over to Joel. As you can understand, this year, trying to figure out our enrollment projections is like throwing a dart at a dartboard for next year. We've looked back at how many students have left the district and gone to private schools. Our district does have a lot of turnover during the year normally, with children moving in and out. Actually, it's quite mobile. So we looked at Dr. McKibben's projections for next year, and I did talk to him on the phone. He said that we can assume probably about 80% of the students will end up coming back in the district. However, we then looked at if we did a straight rollover, because at this time, this is me saying this, and Joel, we don't know what's going to be happening in August, right? So we don't want to, him and I had many conversations. We don't want to start doing something and then say, oh my God, we're still in the pandemic. We did look at this. So we're actually good either way. But right now what we did is we looked at a straight rollover to see how many sections we would need. So I'm going to turn it over to Joel to talk about that, because that's really in his bailiwick.
Yep. So thanks to everybody. But just as Luann said, we're looking at a straight rollover, and as identified why we're looking at the straight rollover, it's what we know today. It's the only thing that we can really say with any, knowledge that, this is the kids we have in school. It's what we can at least base some prediction on what the future may look like. And as Luann said, that could change tomorrow, could look different in May, could look different in September. But if you look at a straight rollover, we do have a decrease of 108 students on that straight rollover. The typical question that asks is, if we're doing a straight rollover, why are we losing kids? And the biggest or the easiest answer for people to understand is our 8th graders going out is bigger than our kindergartners coming in. And why that's really important in this year is because, as Luann said in our memo, we identified that if you look at the 180 students that were down roughly from what we projected, the majority of that comes at our our kindergarten through 3rd grade level. That's where the biggest decrease of students from what we projected. So if you follow or track with me, our kindergarten took one of the biggest hits district-wide this past year. It was down significantly from what we projected. So when we roll that number up, our kindergarten going into 1st is fairly small. What we think we might get for kindergarten is fairly small, 1st going into 2nd, so on and so forth. And we had some big classes at the middle schools going out. So right now we're looking at being down 108 students on a straight rollover. Now, the impact of that will be somewhere around 8 sections. at the building levels. And to equate it, a section is, if you're at an elementary, that is one core class. So, that's one teacher, one at a 4th grade, instead of having 4 teachers, that's such as having 3. If you're at the middle school, instead of having a team of, say, 10 different homerooms or 10 different classrooms, that would be 9, or, could be down to 10. Now, because we were lucky enough with retirements this year of having 11 teachers retire, we don't anticipate having to RIF anybody at this time. Now, we're still playing that game of musical chairs where we're identifying, where everybody is going. But at the moment, we think we can eat that loss of 8 sections without having to reduce staff. Now, reduction in force, for those who may not remember, is when we have to lay off teachers. But if a position opens up, they get called back. And obviously, as we've talked about previously, when you have good staff members that have been trained, that are working for you, what you want to do is keep them as much as possible. You try to avoid rifts if we can. So we think at the moment, we're looking pretty good in that, even though we're going down students and projected to go down sections because of our retirements. So at the moment, we are not going to come and ask the board for any additional staffing. Now, let me kind of put a little asterisk next to that, because typically this is the time where we have all the discussion about the bubble sections, and we've got 4 bubble sections, and we're going to ask for the board to give us, this allowance in case these bubbles burst. Right now, I mean, we really just don't think we're in any position to sit there and try to make a prediction of what this is going to look like. We're significantly different or discrepant from what the demographer and our cohort survival method would have predicted for this next coming school year. And, do we think that in several weeks something could change, or in several months that things could change? Absolutely. So what we're going to be doing, and the key words is adaptability and flexibility on our end. We're going to be monitoring this closely. As I was talking to one of the building principals today, they've got one eye on these numbers. And what we're going to be doing is we start to see significant changes in either what we're going to be offering because of changes in the world, or just what we're seeing in enrollments. We're going to come back to the board and have discussions about what the impact is and what we may be looking for. But we just think right now in February, there's just too many unknowns to come and say, hey, we think we're going to need X. Again, we're hoping that the world will open up and things will go a little bit back to normal and our enrollment will increase, and we'll be able to come back and say, we're asking for authorization to hire some additional teachers. But again, we're just not there right now. The only staffing that we are going to talk to the board about tonight, and again, this is not an action item, it'll come up later in March, is that we are going to ask the board to roll over our K-5 differentiation coaches. A couple of years ago, the board gave us authorization for 2.5 positions. You may recall this coincided with the adoption of our ELA program at our elementary level. We thought it was a lot better to have internal coaches who could go for a couple of years and really work with staff on job embedded coaching and the implementation of this new program. And the first year worked really well. This year was supposed to be our last year for that. But unfortunately, the pandemic came and kind of, screwed all those plans up. So our teachers who were really going to be focused on small group differentiation in the classroom with teachers this year, it really hasn't happened to that degree for 2 reasons. One, obviously, we're not in the classrooms at the beginning of the year. We've had an adaptive pause, and that's really had to make our differentiation coaches adapt and work with our teachers in a different manner. The second thing which has happened is at the beginning of the year, in October and November, when we were really short substitutes, we pulled these people often, and they filled in and did a lot of the, day-to-day substitute teaching for us. So they were critical people to fill the holes for us, but every time we had to pull them, that was one less coaching opportunity that they had. So therefore, they're behind significantly in where they would have been in their coaching opportunities and modeling with staff in the classrooms. So because we're hoping that kids are going to be back in a much more normal format in the fall, we'd like to continue and wrap up this program next year and have those teachers really focus on that small group differentiation within the classroom. And we think that's going to be critical based on kids coming back and where they may be this coming fall for the 21-22 school year. So at that time, we're going to come and ask, or in a couple, I'm sorry, at the March board meeting, we're going to come and ask the board to roll this over for one more year and to continue these 2.5 positions. That's the only staffing at the moment we're coming and asking the board for. This would not be new. It would just be a one-year extension of what we currently had, again, based on the fact that they were unable to meet a lot of the goals this year because of the pandemic. Again, I think the critical thing as we talked about is this is what we know today. I think the rollover method is very conservative, but I think it's the smart approach right now based on what we don't know. But I know that Luann and myself are committed to the fact that once we have different data or once things changes to reevaluate and come back to the board and provide updated information. And at that time, again, it doesn't mean we may not be asking for authorization for positions, but we want more concrete information to be able to come and have that conversation with the board. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that anybody may have.
I have a question and a comment, Joel.
Sure.
Some of our parochial schools right now are at maximum capacity. And fact is that some of the parents in Park Ridge are shopping around have been during the pandemic for a place to place their child because they wanted full day. I assume that you're looking at that big wave of children that are probably going to come from St. Paul or Mary Seed or some of the other parochial schools in the area, more especially, first graders, fourth graders, sixth graders. I think there's going to be a bigger wave than we've experienced in previous years. Are you talking to the parochial schools, or I'm sure you have a better idea than I do?
Yeah, we haven't been specifically talking to the parochial schools, but as Luann has said, we have an idea of the number of people that have gone out, exited the district and why. And I think as Luann said previously, and she may have said it in the memo, to your point, Larry, I think if the world opens up and we're able to offer, more of a format of a traditional what we've seen in the past, we can fully expect, somewhere around 80% of those kids are probably going to come back. And, that is something, as Luann and I've talked about, those are the things we're going to keep an eye on because that would have a significant impact on our enrollment and staffing. And some of the buildings, any of those things where we're opening up, 2-3 sections in a building because of that, that's going to have an impact on space also. So, we are keeping an eye on it. I think we're really trying to figure out as much as we can, try to be proactive in looking at where those numbers might come from and the impact it might have. I just think the hard part right now is trying to figure out, not having a crystal ball on what things are going to look like is when or if that will happen.
It seems like with the pandemic, there's certainly going to be more of a need for differentiation and remediation. So I think certainly extending the coaches is a great idea. And as I understand it, the coaches are for K-5. Is there any need for this more differentiation coaches at the middle school level?
Yeah, so I'll answer, but if Lori wants to chime in, if I don't give the answer that she wants, I'm sure she'll join me. I think, Denise, one of the things that we're going to be looking at, and I think Eric alluded to in his earlier comment when he was talking about the pandemic committee, is I think there are opportunities and things that we're going to have to flush out for potentials for other positions throughout. I think once we have a better handle on what we're going to be dealing with, I think there could be, I'm not saying these are guarantees, but I think there may be discussions on what additional supports we might need for the students across K-8. And I think when we talked about that coming back to the district, later when we have a better handle on what we're dealing with for the fall, again, I think all of those things are on the table as possible options. I don't want to commit myself or the administrative team to anything, but I think we are cognizant of the fact that, some of the needs could be look different than what they have been in the previous years. and we have to really consider what might be the best way to service those kids. And I think we're open to, looking at all different variances of staffing and instruction to meet those needs.
Thank you, Joel.
Any other comments or questions for Joel or Luann?
I just wanted to point out, Rick, that the kindergarten kids that are included in our projections are from the McKibben projections. So we are using that for kindergarten.
Well, I'm just curious, what did he base the 80% rule on? Because, I mean, obviously there's people who went to private school, parochial school, solely because it was in person and we weren't, right? And I would guess, frankly, most of those people went for that reason, but there may be some people that are going to stay because they actually like the school, right? They think, okay, I like that better than Washington or Jefferson or whatever it is. And then there's others who are going to come back because they know they want to go back to their home school.
So I think it was a discussion among the demographers, because I actually caught him in the middle of a demographer's virtual convention, which I can't imagine how exciting that is.
Yeah, that's got to be really watching paint dry.
Right. So I think they're just talking and seeing, what they're seeing probably in other states and that. And the biggest thing that's coming up is the census, because it's a huge mess. And so our projections, once these are done, are going to rely on those numbers.
Right.
So there's a lot of focus on that right now.
But I would think that 80% number is community to community, because where you have maybe, there's communities where the parochial / private schools are meh, but they were in person. And so people are there and the public schools are a million times better.
Right.
And then there's other communities where the parochial schools are way better than the public schools. And so some communities you could have 60%, some you could have 90%, I would assume.
Well, and then you look at the grade the child's in. If the child was in 6th, you might decide to leave them at the parochial school just so they matriculate with those kids.
Yeah. So we won't really know until summer.
Until we see the whites of their eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's exactly right. Okay. Any other comments from the board? And then I'll again, we're not taking any action on this, but I will see if there's any public comment. Okay, Natasha or Dr. Olson, any public comments on this?
None.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Joel and Luann, for the presentation. And I know we'll be hearing more in a little bit on that. All right, we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is the approval and discussion of the food management services contract, which kind of had this conversation, I know, with the renewal, right? At the beginning, it feels like we just did it 2 months ago, but it was unfortunately a while ago because this whole pandemic feels.
I was going to ask you guys, does this feel like it was just yesterday we did this?
Yeah.
It's so scary. So what I'm bringing to you this for approval is looking at another 1-year extension of the Quest contract. So every year we are bound, unless we go out for RFP, to bring this to you for renewal. So every year. Quest is not raising any of their administrative fees, so all of the management and administrative will stay the same. They didn't raise them last year either. The only increase we pay is on our groceries, basically, right? So groceries and supplies, and that cost is directly passed on to us. I do want to, let the board know, and maybe a lot of you already knew, but during the pandemic, especially during when it first started last March, Quest really stepped up. District 63 was in desperate straits. Their food service provider was not able to handle what they needed. And Quest was able, because we weren't doing anything except our national school lunch, so we had a lot of extra people, we were able to help them to get their kids fed until their food service supplier could get up to speed and was able to handle it. And they did pay for all of it. So that was actually very great that they were able to pivot like that. Over the summer, our employees were over at the high school. So we joined efforts together to do summer free lunch for the students. It was just one less place for parents, staff to drive to. Quest has done a great job as we have gone back in session and back out of session. Lindsay Borchers, who is our director, is top notch. She works with our families. She gives them her cell phone number. So we, I think, run a very well-oiled machine as far as our hot lunch program. I'm hoping that next year, if the pandemic's over, we can get back to serving the lunches that we were serving. I know a lot of people are missing the breakfast entrees at elementary, but they don't really transport as well as when we can bring them in the warmers. All the meals right now are individually packaged, so even at the middle school. So hopefully next year we can get back to the middle school students just, being amazed at all the options they have for things that they can buy. It's kind of like a rite of middle school. So any questions?
Well, why don't we take a motion, Luann, on this, and then we can open it up for discussion and debate with the board. So if anyone would like to make this motion on this action item.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge, Niles, Illinois, approve the extension of the Quest Food Services contract for the 2021-22 school year.
Second.
Thanks. Denise had the motion and Rebecca had the second. Is there discussion from the board? I've got a quick question for Luann. So I think it was maybe, well, it was just before the pandemic started, but I remember some folks on the sustainability side had come in and asked for the board to consider this idea of moving to things like, ketchup and syrup dispensers instead of individual use ones. And I know you had some thoughts on that at the time. And then I assume that the pandemic just kind of turned that all on its head right now, because I'm presuming that Quest isn't going to be doing things like that going forward, where people would have to, 100 people would be touching the same thing to do that. So I guess my question is, I'm kind of answering my own question there, but my bigger question is that as a result going to add to costs overall, because probably more of this is going to be single serving type things from here on out?
So for right now, because we're having to even buy, the clamshells for the food to be delivered, right? So that's an increase in cost for us, because normally the children are served on the compostable plates, or at the middle school on the ones that we put in the dishwashers. So we do have added packaging costs already this year from packaging, labeling, because when the food's brought to the school, right, the child's classroom name and teacher's name's already put on it, so they know where the food goes because the food is delivered to the classroom. So we are seeing that additional cost. Next year, as far as if, let's say, things return to normal, I am not really sure when things will return to normal as far as sharing condiments and things like that, or if we ever will see it.
Well, that's sort of my question, Lan, because do you think that this is, I know you don't have a crystal ball on this, but do you think this is going to be a major shift just in the way that food is delivered in schools as a result of what we've gone through here?
Yeah, and I don't know that I see a salad bar like coming back to middle schools or high schools either.
Right.
Now, we were pre-packaging the packets of ketchup and that for the students, although I misspoke last year at the meeting. Emerson, I think it's Emerson, one of the middle schools does already have the large pump bottles. So I had misspoke. So I didn't realize that we did have that in one of our schools. But obviously when the kids come back and are actually coming into the cafeterias, it'll be all prepackaged for right now.
Okay, so Quest, under this contract, Quest isn't projecting additional increases. I mean, I know we're paying for the groceries, and so, presumably the cost, if you're buying single servings of X, Y, or Z, that just means the costs in general across the board are going to go up. I assume they're projecting that into this contract.
Yeah, so I mean, we will see some increased costs, and especially as long as if in the fall you have to continue with the individual meals, we will see increased packaging costs.
Right. Which is just going to get transferred to the parents, the families, right?
Right.
We're not eating that increase. It's a margin that's going to stay consistent.
Now, last year before the pandemic, we were doing so beautiful with our revenue and everything looking so great. And then, because I was very happy with how it was looking. And then when the pandemic hit, obviously everything went upside down. And obviously right now we're upside down. But we have, we do try to run a zero cost, try to keep it as low for the district so the parents that are actually utilizing it are paying for it.
Right.
So I don't think we'll be reducing meal costs anytime soon. But we do make sure any children that need lunch are given lunch. So we do make sure that that is done in all of our schools. And if they need fee waivers or National School Lunch Program, we do reach out to them and make sure that those families are taken care of. And right now with our students that we still have in remote, we are still servicing them as far as, food pickups and that for them. So Lindsay's working with those families on a case-by-case basis on even what time of day works for them to pick up their food.
We've solved all of our problems, in the very beginning. We had some problems with movement of food from one school to Carpenter. And fact is, Quest has done a really good job with correcting problems we had early on. I'm very pleased with that. And I'm pleased with the way Quest pitched in during the summer with the help that they gave over at Maine South High School. And I thought that was wonderful.
Thank you.
I just want to follow up on your comment on Lindsay. I think her emails, they have a bit of empathy. Her sense of humor is in there, yet they're really straightforward. I so appreciate her communication with the district.
And that is exactly how her personality is too. It's not like she's not putting on a show. That's exactly who she is. She's like perfect for this job.
Luann, can you remind us again, since we're only looking at a renewal for the contract and not the whole contract, can you just give us the cliff notes again on how the pricing, who and how is the pricing set for the food items that the kids are purchasing? Are we giving Quest a margin that they can't go above and then that's what it is? Or do they have discretion to set it or whatever they want?
Well, we set the price. So the board sets the prices, right? So you guys had voted on the 440 and you voted in the past on the menu for the middle school. We call their menu an a la carte menu.
Right.
So that is set in that direction. What Quest is doing is, of course, they're hiring all the people and they're buying all of the food. And what they look for is when they're buying in large quantities, we also get rebates. So with Quest, we actually get the rebate. A lot of food suppliers, you don't get the rebate. So they do that. And the milk is bid out, right? But that has to be bid out. And so we know we're getting the best price on milk. And for the other food products, they know they have to stay within our bounds. And that's why last year was looking so great was, we finally got everything working right and really great. And, we're going full steam ahead. And then this happened.
All right. Any other questions from the board on the renewal? Okay. Out to the public. Any questions, Natasha or Dr. Olson, from the public?
None.
No.
Okay. Take a roll call vote.
Biagi,
Yes.
Sotos, Riles,
Yes.
Little,
Yes.
Pearl,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Salas. Yes. Sotos, one more time. Okay, motion carries.
Great. Thank you. All right. We've got another discussion on a long-term contract here on the electrical services agreement. Luann, that one's yours as well.
Okay, so Jason is learning everything. If I was him, my head would be spinning. We back in November of 2017 bought 4 years of electricity at that time. And we had set it at a not to exceed 7 cents per kilowatt. I have been watching the markets and working with Tradition Energy on seeing where kind of the markets are moving. So we wanted to start looking at purchasing anywhere from a year to 4 additional years of electricity. And I just wanted to share with you, just pull this up here, is, you know, one question that you may have is, why are we doing this in the middle of a cold February? Well, when Jason and I started this, it was a nice warm January for you guys. What our strategy does is it really protects us from these types of things, short-term weather-driven price changes, because we've already purchased our electricity at a certain price. So no matter what happens with the weather, our gas or electric prices are staying the same. The risks that we're concerned about include nuclear and coal plant retirements. We've all heard a lot about that. The demand for natural gas and the curtailing of the natural gas production is also being talked about. And then forward capacity price increases. So this year, when we basically shut down the school district back in March, right, we're not using nearly enough electricity. So we are on the 100% swing. So that, if you remember, is if we close a building down, we're not being penalized for it, right? Because typically on some contracts, you're still paying for that and you're going to be penalized for it because you shut the building down. Well, Constellation, who is our current supplier, it was difficult on them, not difficult on us, because we didn't have to purchase that electricity that we didn't need. So they kind of were stuck with it. But that's why we want to have a swing contract. So given the current market conditions and not knowing what's going to happen going forward, as far as coal and natural gas and all of that, we are recommending that the district look at extending potentially up to 4 years if we can lock in at a rate of less than 6 cents per kilowatt.
So Luann, why don't we take a motion on this and then we can ask more questions at that point.
I know, it's super interesting.
All right, I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the contract with the lowest responsible bidder on Friday, February 12th, 2021 for electrical service at a not to exceed price of 6 cents per kilowatt at all district buildings for a period not to exceed 48 months as presented.
Second.
Great, thanks. Denise had the motion, Fred had the second. I have just a quick question. Since we're giving you discretion on this, Luann, I wasn't clear from the report. What would be in your what would affect your decision with respect to 12 versus 48 months? I mean, I get the number, the percentage is easy, right? Because whatever's the cheapest is the cheapest. But why would you potentially choose 36 instead of 48 or 12 or 24?
Because what I look at is their price comparisons, and I had given you guys one from January 21st. And so when I look at like Direct Energy, they were at 5.6%, 5.7% for 2 years. But in 3 years, but when I get out to the 4th year, they're over 6 cents.
But if you're going on the assumption that, if we're going on this belief that prices are only going to go up from here because of all the factors you mentioned earlier, wouldn't you want to lock in at today's rate for the longest time possible? Or is there, I mean, just because the 2-year price is better than the 4-year price, if over the long haul, 4 years is still going to be cheaper than what it'll be if we have to re-up in 2 years, wouldn't that make more sense?
Yes, I mean, we could go to 6.5 cents. I wouldn't go higher than that.
Right.
So we could pull the motion back, have her remake the motion at 6.5 cents.
So you're anticipating it being, I guess, less than that, or more than that? Is that?
No, when I talked to him last week, he was confident in the 6 cents.
For 48.
For up to 48.
but not confident that it would definitely be 48, just potentially up to 48.
Yeah, we know on 2 years for sure, because as they're looking farther out, right, your cost does
Right.
get more expensive the farther out you look.
And that's just because the utilities are hedging their bets at that point, right? They're
Correct, especially right now.
yeah. All right. Well, I'm curious. I mean,
What I
I'm
can
curious.
do
Oh, go ahead.
is tomorrow, I can let Eric know what we settle at and how many years that is and what the future, like if we only buy 2 years or something, let you guys, he can put in his Friday memo, what we were able to purchase, kind of what we were looking at for future years. And I could bring it back for discussion. And if you wanted to look at purchasing additional years at that time, we could. I mean, I would turn it around within a month.
Well, and I'm personally, I don't want to speak for the board right now. I'm fine giving you the discretion to do this based on whatever the numbers come out. We've had this debate multiple times here. I've seen it at the Park District where everybody's just speculating on what the world's going to look like 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now, and nobody knows. We're all just kind of guessing, right? But if you've got a good price and it's 4 years out, and you're convinced, I'm not holding you to this, but you're telling us that you're convinced that these prices are only going to go up from here because of all the factors you referenced earlier, then it would seem to me you should be going for 4 years.
Right. We do know there, and Jason and I had a really good discussion with them about the renewable energy and all that. So we do know related to that, costs are going to be going up because they have to have a way to save that energy, which we don't right now.
Right.
Right. The wind or that.
To build all the infrastructure to do that.
Correct. That is correct. Yeah. It's going to cost a fortune, but we are moving toward that.
Right. Anybody else have thoughts on that? Because right now this motions kind of leaves it wide open. So if the board's okay with that, that's fine. That's my 2 cents.
So Rick, are you saying like you wouldn't be in favor of a 3-year? You're wanting to just go for 4 years? Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Well, I guess I'm struggling because if the rationale for this in the first place is that we believe strongly that the prices are only going to go up from here, why wouldn't we lock in 4 years? Why wouldn't we lock in 20 years if we could, if that's the case, right?
Let me see how many he'll lock in.
Yeah, no, I know, but I'm normally not. I mean, I think we had, and Tom can remember this. I think we had a discussion a couple of years ago on the gas contract, and we were just the opposite on that one. We were telling you to go a little lighter because it wasn't clear that that the prices, because of how much natural gas production was going on at the time, we felt like they were going to go down from there, and so we didn't want to lock in for a really long period of time, as I recall the conversation. But
I mean, I was just trying to be conservative.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I guess my thought is this conservative play might be, again, if we're all convinced that they're only going up from here, the conservative play is do it for as long as you can and lock in. I don't know.
I'm fine with the not to exceed 48 months.
But you're willing to take a 12-month?
I mean, that's the thing, because a lot of this is uncertain. I mean, it's more likely than not that it will increase, but then still, you never know what could happen. So
it's always a gamble when it comes to doing this, and I go through this every 2 years down with my real estate properties. Just if it makes any difference to anybody, this go around, I'm telling my people to lock me in for longer than I normally do. I normally do a 2 year. This year I'm going to try to lock in maybe for 3. I don't anticipate natural gas going down with what I see going on in the natural gas economic world and the heavy push shift to going to cleaner gases. I just think that the gas prices might stay steady or go up.
So Rick, what if we change the motion, and I think we can do this, Tony, correct? That you could change it and just go back to the 7 cents that we did last time, or the 6.5 I'd be comfortable with.
Well, I guess again, this is just me, but it's not about the price, it's about the number of years. for me. Like I
Oh, I
wouldn't,
see, I
I
see.
wouldn't want
Okay.
a 12-month or a 24-month contract. I would at minimum, what Tom just said, want minimum 3 year and maybe 4.
Right, but then the
So,
motion is, as drafted, says not to exceed 48 months, so it's within, you know.
but we're
that
giving
whole-
Luann the discretion to do a
Exactly.
12-month contract, which
Right,
I'm not
but she
comfortable with.
knows that, okay, so do you want a minimum and a maximum in
Well,
the revised motion?
I'm fine with taking an up or down vote on this and just seeing where, if everybody's comfortable with it. I don't want to dictate to everybody else just because I feel this way. So I'm fine with whatever the board wants to do. I'll vote how I'm going to vote.
I'm comfortable with the motion as written with Luann, knowing that I think the longer we can get it, the better.
We need to raise the price per kilowatt to go longer.
Yeah, because when we get out to year 4, we're probably going to see a little over 6 cents.
So we went to 6.5. We have a better chance of getting that 3 or 4 year.
Yes.
Or are you suggesting 7?
I'm just saying, if you want to do 7, we can do that. Obviously, if I see something that doesn't look good, I'm not going to do it. I mean, I'm just not going to do that. It's not in the best interest of the district.
So then, Rick, are you uncomfortable with the cap though of 48?
No. I'm uncomfortable with a floor.
Well, I thought it was 2 things though, because you wanted it to exceed the 48 plus right?
No, I don't want it
mean,
to exceed 48. I'm
if
fine with
it's in our
36 or
interest.
48.
So
Okay.
you want a contract not less than 36 months.
Right.
Isn't it
That's
true? Isn't it true that if we go out to 36, that the rate per kilowatt goes down?
No, it goes up a little because you're right. There's more
They're hedging their bets.
uncertainty.
Yeah,
right, the
they're
farther
hedging
you
their
go
bets, and
out.
so they're ticking it up a little bit to hedge their bets.
So it'd be a
It's not
contract
much.
not less than 36 months at a rate of 6.5 or 7 cents per kilowatt is what we would be.
Yeah.
looking.
So then are you removing the cap though? Of the
Well, you're
month?
only getting presented up to 48, right, Luann? Or are you getting
Yes,
presented
I cannot
farther
buy
than that?
more than 48.
So it's
right now.
irrelevant. Yeah.
But what I do need the authority is if it comes in as it was at 6.058,
Right. You need to be able to do
I
that.
can't do it.
Right. Yep. So the motion as presented right now is up to 48 months, up to 6 cents. And it sounds to me like you will not be able to get a contract, or at least as we sit here right now, probably not get a 36 or 48 month contract at 6 cents.
Right. Probably I'll get 36, but I'm not sure about 48.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the motion's kind of written in a way that it's not possible. So, which seems kind of weird that we're going to vote on that, but that's me.
Can we change it to not less than 36 months at
Mm-hmm.
6.5 cents per kilowatt hour?
We can, if there's an interest in a rescission of the second in the motion and we go back with a new motion. But if people want to vote up or down on this, we can do that too.
Fred, you had the second.
Yeah, I'm willing to rescind the second.
I'm willing to rescind my motion.
Okay. So now we're back to the beginning on this. So does someone want to make a new motion?
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the contract with the lowest responsible bidder on Friday, February 12, 2021, for electrical services at a not to exceed price of 0.65 cents per kilowatt hour at all district buildings for a period not less than 36 months as presented.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Denise and Fred. Okay, any discussion on this motion as presented? Luann, you good with that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right, any discussion from the public?
No.
None.
Nope. Anything else from the board before we take a vote? Okay, let's take a vote.
Riles,
Yes.
Salas, yes. Little,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Biagi,
Yes.
Pearl,
Yes.
Sotos,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Luann. So the next agenda item is the presentation of the strategic plan. And as everybody knows, this was one of Dr. Olson's goals that the board had set for him. And originally the plan was we were going to have a full-blown discussion of this tonight. And he was going to do the full presentation, and then we would go round and round about it tonight. What he and I discussed a week or so ago was to do this in two parts, and to have sort of an executive summary for the board of everything tonight, so that it gave us an opportunity, since this is the first time we're seeing it, other than, you know, we received it in the board packet a couple days ago, but this is the first time that we're seeing it, and frankly, that the public is seeing it, that we have an opportunity to review just from a high level tonight, take it home with us, discuss this, and then this next meeting we have scheduled, I believe, for the 25th, we'll devote the entire evening, with the exception of one or two other smaller agenda items. We will devote the entire evening to this topic, where both the board can discuss it in more depth after we've had a chance to chew on it a bit, as well as the public. So did I get that right, Dr. Olson?
You did.
Okay.
Took
Then
all
the
the
floor
words
is
right out of my
yours.
mouth. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So I'm very excited to present this proposed strategic plan for the next 5 years. And I just want to walk the board through the process that we took and what the plan actually entails. So as a reminder, we did 2 thought exchange surveys last year for parents and staff. We started in the spring and had started our first survey, and then right in the middle of the pandemic came, and we saw all the participation drop off rapidly. So we also offered the survey in the fall of this year and put those pieces of information together. Then in the fall, we formed a strategic planning committee made up of the various stakeholders. And then over the October 25th weekend, the committee participated in a 2-day retreat to form the foundation of the new plan. Then in November and December, administration further developed what the committee's ideas were and then added additional objectives to include. On January 20th, Lori Lopez and I met with a group of 7th and 8th grade students to review the plan and seek their input. That information will be part of the presentation that I'll share next time, along with some of the members of the committee joining us as well. And then on January 30th, we pulled together the strategic planning committee one more time so that they could review all the work it had done, make any necessary changes in preparation for bringing it to you. So going back to those thought exchange surveys, this was the question in yellow of what we were asking the community. Basically, what are we doing well and on what we can improve. So just as a reminder, you can see here just the participation. So it was very important for us to do that fall survey, as you see that we had a significant more participation that second time around. So here are the top 8 reasons of what District 64 is doing well. Why did I pick 8 and not 10? Because after 8, we saw a big drop off. And so it just seemed that that was the appropriate place to make it. The 4 that I've highlighted in yellow, I just want to point out, not only are they on the what we're doing well, but they're also on the what we should improve. So, you know, I think with any types of surveys, when you're doing a large group of people like that, you're going to get different opinions. And some are going to say the curriculum's great, and some are going to say, oh my gosh, why aren't you focusing on the curriculum? So, you know, we can delve down a little further to see what, you know, each of these points were. But this sort of gave the committee kind of a basis of where to start. So this is the current mission for District 64, to inspire every child to discover, learn, achieve, and care. And one of the things that we talked about on the committee was the fact that this feels a little bit more like a motto or like a catchphrase or like, here's District 64 where we inspire, every child to do, these things instead of necessarily making it a mission statement. We also, as an administrative team, talked a lot about, do we abandon discover, learn, achieve, and care and go with something new, or do we continue these ideas? And the thought behind it is, since these are 4 solid pillars of what we would do in education, that why don't we just keep them the same? But how we discover, learn, achieve, and care might look different in this 5 years than the next 5 years or the 5 years after that. So the committee decided that they wanted to change it a little bit to together we discover, learn, and then instead of achieve, the committee felt strongly about the word grow. And the sense on the committee was achieve felt like you get to it and now you're done, where grow is like you're never done and you're continuing to go. And so that was, the main idea of why they changed achieve to grow. And then also is that the previous mission statement really is only focused on children. And while, of course, they are the most important, this is more that, well, what about staff that are discovering and learning and caring, and those that this should be our entire organization instead of only focusing on the students. So then what we did with the mission, which when you're doing a mission, you're basically answering what's our purpose or why do we exist? Why does District 64 even here? And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to stay with those 4 themes, but we wanted to further define them, because what we found on the committee is what discovery meant to one person didn't necessarily mean the same to the next person. And so to put some initial ideas around what these 4 things are going to mean for the next 5 years, with the idea that we can use this as a foundation to build all the goals and objectives and everything that we're going to go from there. I think that doing it in this way, we still wanted to be short. I think when districts get too long in their mission and vision statements, then they just become writing on a website. And so to really live it, it needs to be in a simple form that people can remember and people can be able to access. And so that was the idea of changing the mission to this. This is the current vision in District 64. I don't really have any concerns with the content that's in here, but it once again, it felt a little bit like trying to put every single educational word that you could get in here. And that's the danger with sometimes creating these statements. And so even just seeing the difference from this one to what we are proposing, it was just taking a lot of that information and reducing it down. Once again, a vision is, what are we striving for? What is this objective far away that we're trying to achieve? And maybe we'll achieve it tomorrow, maybe we'll achieve it, next year, but what are we seeking to do? And if you read through this, you can still see that discover, learn, grow, and care is embedded into this as well. So that theme carries throughout. So then once we get through the mission, vision, and motto, we then start to look at goal areas and then what are the objectives under those goal areas. And this was actually the last thing that the committee did, was that they were struggling with what order to put the 5 goals in. Because whatever we put number 1 is going to look like it's the most important thing, but it might not be. They're all equal. And so the idea of coming up with a graphic where the 5 goals aren't given one, greater emphasis than the other was what the team really wanted to do. So this is just our draft version to give you a sense of kind of what the team was thinking and why it was designed in this way. And so we do have 5 goal areas, and then we do have 30 objectives under those goal areas. So the first goal area is maximize resources for sustainability. There is several goals in this area. One is to ensure the next 5-year facility plan. We also want to continue to assess and refine staffing models. So just to remind the board, when we're talking about staffing models, what we mean is that how many social workers do we need per building based on student population? There's a formula for that. How many teachers do we need for intervention? For all these different positions, there are models that we're following on how to staff those. But I think it's time as a district that we need to assess those again and see if we still believe that those are the staffing models we should be following today. And then also to increase energy efficiency at all facilities. Just so you know, the reason that I've highlighted certain phrases here is that the committee felt like these phrases would be something that would need an asterisk and need a greater explanation. That staffing models might not be something that the average person who looks on the website would understand what that means. So to continue with this goal area, we also want to explore opportunities to expand the substitute pool. This is meant in a couple of different ways in terms of the board's already worked on additional contracts, but should we be advertising in different places? Should we be recruiting in a certain way? There's a lot of different, ways that districts go about expanding their substitute pool, and we felt this is something we should continue to focus on, especially since there is the shortage currently in Illinois. Data privacy and cybersecurity was, we did spend some time on that as a committee, that they felt strongly that this is something we have to keep staying on top of. Everything keeps changing. Everything becomes more sophisticated. The ways that people are breaking into various files and things is only growing. And so we need to stay up with it in terms of, what is our security of protection across those things. And especially, as we hear things when Target or Home Depot says, I'm sorry, but your information might have been shared. Well, that's very different than saying your child's information has potentially been shared. And so we take that very seriously, and the committee wanted us to continue to focus on it. And then they also wanted us to maintain financial responsibility as we continue to enhance our facilities. They want us to keep enhancing, but at the same time, we have to keep operating within our means. The second goal area is broaden best practices. The first two objectives would be curriculum reviews in the area of math and the area of social studies, and then also to improve green educational experiences and practices. And so what was important that we talked through is how are we teaching students in terms of curriculum of how to take care of their world, how to recycle and those kinds of things, but then also what are the practices we're actually following, what's actually happening at lunch, and what happens to all that refuge and so forth. And so both of those things need to go hand in hand. Next would be we want to continue to build the capacity to make sure that 504 or special education plans or intervention plans are consistent across the district. And while you have systems that are consistent across the district, that doesn't always mean that everybody's interpreting them the same way or everybody's acting on them in the same way. And so we felt that it's important for us to continue to work on that, because I always want what a child is offered at Washington. If you're a child at Carpenter, you should be offered that as well. And it shouldn't matter where you go in the district in terms of those needs. Second, earlier tonight we had talked about differentiation. We feel that, while our staff is already doing a great job with differentiation, there is always room to grow with it. There's always more that we could be doing. And then again, just simply differentiation is how are we differing curriculum to meet the needs of different students? And then lastly is that also to continue to inform our staff and help our staff develop of how to make data informed decisions. There's a clear division that we make in education about calling it data informed or data driven. And data driven tends to mean more, we're just going to do whatever the data says no matter what. Where data informed decisions is we have to consider the data before we make any decisions. And we think that we can grow there as well. And then finally, to also evaluate what we do for our non-tenured staff. You know, so much focus is on the professional development of the teachers, but this is also a very important group. And when I say non-tenured, mostly I'm talking about teacher assistants, but I also could be talking about secretaries or custodians or those types of positions as well. Are we providing the right professional development? Are we continuing to help those groups grow just as we are with the teachers? The third goal is explore program expansion. This first one is that we want to maintain a committee that's going to be focused on innovation. And when I say innovation, I mean is looking at the next thing. What is the next thing we should be considering, that we should be talking about, that we should be looking at when it comes to the classroom and it comes to teaching and learning? And I think that sometimes when districts, you know, have a lot of work to do with improving things or fixing things, then we can forget to start looking longer term. And so what I really wanted there to be was a group, a committee where their goal is to continue to focus. This isn't a group that's making decisions, but it might be a group that says to Lori Lopez, you know, we've been talking and we really feel that student engagement is something that District 64 really needs to focus on in the future because of A, B, and C. And then Lori could take that information and go forward from there. But it's just an idea to have a group that's continually looking towards the future. We'd also like to update our grading and reporting policies to a standards-based practice. Really, districts are all moving in this direction. And when you call around to other districts, they've either already done it or they're talking about it. There are different ways to do it, but I think this is a pretty huge piece for District 64 of really changing and upping the way that we can do teaching and learning when you go to a standards-based practice. We're also exploring full-day kindergarten options. To be honest, this one was originally written just as explore full-day kindergarten options, but the committee felt like, okay, but the district's been exploring options for years, and why is this going to be any different? And even though I know we're coming to the board this summer with here's what the recommendation is from the kindergarten committee, they wanted to make sure that that would actually be determined and that we wouldn't be sitting here 5 years later saying that we're still exploring. And then lastly, that we want to look at our school schedules, how we design a student day, and just make sure that we're continuing to best meet student needs in the 21st century. We have some committees and groups that are already in this work, and we agree that we should continue to focus on it in the next 5 years as well. We want to review and enhance the district's crisis plan. As a reminder, our crisis plan is what do we do in an emergency? What would happen if a school started on fire? What would happen if we had to evacuate and move the students somewhere else? What if we had, unfortunately, a shooter in the building or something like that? What are all of our protocols that we follow in those situations? And while I feel really good about where our crisis plan is, in reviewing it, I really do think it needs an overhaul. And it really does need some critical pieces just to make sure that I can feel that we have an utmost top crisis plan ready to go. We want to continue to review and implement everything that we're doing with special education. We know that, due to the audits and the board's interest in most likely doing another audit, sometime soon to kind of keep continually tracking our progress, that we didn't want to dictate too much in the plan of what should happen with special education, but we want to ensure that that's still a priority and that's still an item that's happening throughout these 5 years. And then lastly, I also feel that we've been able to get our SEL or our social emotional learning programs up to a good place. But now I think we're ready to go to the next level of what we can actually do with that time that we're spending with students, what the lessons that we're teaching and so forth. And so we want to spend some time looking at our program as well. The next area is enhanced diversity, inclusion, equity, and access. And the first one is that we want to continue to grow our hiring practices. How can we be reaching out to other communities and looking to, create more of a diverse staff and encourage other people to come to District 64, in their consideration for a job. And so we want to continue to explore that and grow those hiring practices. We also want to implement anti-bias education and just considering, what are the biases that we carry and how do we carry them into conversations and how we interact with others. Obviously, what we would be teaching at a kindergarten level and an 8th grade level is going to be extremely different. And this also includes talking about staff as well. I've been through some anti-bias training myself. It is quite shocking when you realize the biases that you have that you don't even realize that you carry. And I think this is really important to ensure how we're accepting all kids into the building, to spend some time looking at this, and then how we acknowledge them as people and how we acknowledge their contributions. And then we also want to ensure that there's an access to culturally inclusive materials in all subject areas. And what this basically means is, are we considering all cultures when we're presenting a certain lesson, or are we too focused on one? Now, obviously, depending on what you're talking about, like if you're talking about history, well, you might only be talking about certain cultures because they're the ones that were involved in that event. But there are other things that we need to just ensure, are we including more points of view for students than just one? And then lastly, that we look to expand already what we have in terms of how we celebrate diversity. And then also the committee felt it was important that we focus in on inclusion as well. How do students feel more included in what we do? That could be anything from special education to how they feel as their ethnic background, to how they feel as a learner, to how they feel, based on how they look, all things considered in this area. The board will notice that out of the 5 goal areas, this is the smallest one. And the committee felt that it was important enough that it was its own goal area. But in talking it through, we really felt that these 4 areas, these 4 objectives do address what we're looking for. And if we were to have created additional ones, it would have been to just make them look full. And we really didn't want to do that. We want to focus on obviously what's important. And the last goal area is strengthen relationships and communication. We want to enhance the district's social media guidelines. And when I say that, I mean, how does district office communicate? How do principals communicate? How do teachers communicate? If there was some appropriateness, for students, in that area. But for the most part, we're really talking about the adults in the district. And I think it's important that we do review that, and we do have a more systemic approach to how we're addressing these areas, which leads into the next one, is that we need to have a comprehensive strategy for communication. And that involves everything from the Friday principal newsletter to how we're communicating about important information and changes to the district and everywhere in between. And how do staff share out information? How do they communicate? You know, all of that, that we really think we need to take some time to develop a District 64 systemic strategy to how we should approach communication. The next one is to cultivate the organizational health of the district. As I've talked with the board before, our organization's general health is something that I do want to improve. How our different groups work together, how our different groups help each other as we all work together for the benefit of kids. I think that there has been work done on this already, but I definitely want it to be a focus area in the next 5 years. We want to overhaul the district website. I really think that we need to start from the bottom and build up. We really need an entire new platform and a new organization to things. I think in some ways our website might have too much information because then it's more difficult to find what you're looking for. And so we definitely want that to be an objective. We want to continue to build upon the existing community partnerships we already have, but we also want to grow new ones, that we want to continue to how does District 64 combine and make in as a member of the District 64 larger community. What is our role and what are our connections in those pieces? And then lastly, that, you know, even before I came to District 64, I was hearing things like how strong the staff is. And now that I've been here, I'm able to see it. But I don't think we do a good enough job of promoting that and showcasing of what are the great things that our teachers are doing. How are they performing? Why is it a great staff in District 64? But then there's other things. There's great principals and, you know, there's great secretaries and, you know, that there are all these different people that we feel that we could be promoting on a much better basis so that the community can see these things, although we generally know it. So then, just in terms of timeline, we've given the board a couple of different documents. One is it walks through each goal area, each objective, talks about who is going to be overseeing that, even though there might be plenty of more people involved, who at the end of the day is responsible for ensuring that that objective is carried out, and when do we predict that we're going to have that completed. And then lastly, how will that objective be evaluated for success? We have also put it together this way in terms of looking at it by year. How much is actually happening per year? And, you know, the committee was curious, you know, how did you make these decisions about what went where? And there were a couple different reasons. Some of these, like we had to do A before we get to B. So it made sense that A had to go first. Secondly, it was looking at, you know, if Lori Lopez has this many responsibilities over the next 5 years, what makes sense to do in year 1, in year 2, in year 3? Then we also have to consider the staff. How much new or change can the staff handle in a given time? And are we spacing things out appropriately to ensure that if we're implementing some things, that they can all go about it in a nice, organized manner? So those are just some of the reasons why we sort of built that the way it was, but that you can see it both ways. So just the final couple of items is that the way that we would work going forward once the board approves the plan is that when each of these objectives is completed, we need to come to the board and do a formal presentation. That's regardless of whether the board has to actually vote on them or not. We still feel that these objectives, the board needs to know that this objective was completed and how it was completed. Secondly, that we will also put a dashboard on our website that will track the progress of these objectives so that anybody could go on and see, oh, they're about halfway through that right now. Oh, this one they haven't started yet. This one was already completed, and anybody could go ahead and track where we were on those particular objectives. And then lastly here is what we really need to be conscious of going forward is watching out for the big new idea that, you know, a year from now, someone says, oh, well, why aren't you considering this? And then we push aside the strategic plan because we want to jump on that. And why the strategic plan exists is these are the areas we've said we're going to focus on in the next 5 years. We, of course, know that there's going to be new things that are going to come along, and we want to be adaptive to that. But it can't be at the sacrifice of the plan. We would have to see, can this idea be worked in? Where should it be worked in? Or is this something that needs to happen in the next strategic plan? So we just need to be obviously strategic about it. So as Rick had highlighted at our next board meeting, just a couple of additional pieces. Like I said, we'll bring all the student feedback that we had received. Members of the committee will join the board that night so they can share their perspective and answer questions from the board as well. And that will just take a much deeper dive into it and be able to explore certain objectives and answer questions and just help the board make sure that they fully understand everything before moving forward. Okay, thank you. That was the presentation, and I'm happy to take any clarifying questions that the board has in preparation for next week. Or next meeting, I mean.
And
oh,
go ahead, Larry.
Well, I have a comment and a question. I've talked to Joel on several occasions about our hiring practices and how we could possibly go out and reach some groups that we're not reaching. So I'd like to hear more about that in the future. Minorities. The other point that I wanted to discuss, 4 years ago when I came on the board, we had some problems with the way there are no standards set for the way we hand off children from the elementary to the middle schools. And how our principals and staff in the elementary schools approach the principal and staffs of the middle schools when we hand those children off where it's their responsibility. And I'd like to see some of that discussion, a set of standards across the district. It was hit and miss. Some of our principals did it really well, some not so well. And if we could get a set of standards or something that is in your strategic plan, that would be nice.
Okay. It's a good idea.
So for the board, don't feel obligated tonight. I know we're just sort of going over this for the first time, and I'm sure we're going to come up with a million thoughts and questions between now and the next meeting. But if there's stuff you want to hit Eric with tonight, or if you want to do it after the meeting and, you know, email him with questions prior to that, whatever.
So I just briefly wanted to discuss the procedure. I know Eric mentioned that he wanted us to understand the plan when we're presented with it on the 25th. So, and I know Larry just now had a couple of points, you know, or a little bit of input. So procedurally, how is that going to happen on the 25th? So let's say we have comments and we think, you know, X and Y should be, you know, included or amended or, you know, at least thought about. How does everybody envision that would play out on the 25th?
Yeah, so as Rick and I had talked about it, we felt that we will provide the opportunity for the board to vote, like it'll be there in case the board would like to approve it. But if the board, you know, wants me to go back and make some additional changes or, you know, has areas that they want to explore first before approving, it would be perfectly fine for us to bring it back to the next meeting.
Okay, because that's not, there's not much time between. So that's good though, because we have the March 11th one if we don't approve it on the 25th. So
Yeah,
That would be
and
good.
I don't think there's any pressure, right now. It would be perfectly fine. I wouldn't want to wait till June, but it's certainly fine for us to wait, a board meeting or two more.
Well, I'd like to get this voted on with this board, before handing it off to a new board, if we can do that, so that we've got a couple meetings, but we can always call extras to make that happen. And the other thought, Carol, I agree with you, because I wasn't exactly sure how that would look. It's not like it's a motion, where we can just amend it. I mean, this is a pretty extensive document. But one of the thoughts I had too is that if between now and the 25th, if board members want to propose changes or suggestions to parts of the document, we could potentially redline it, or at least have something where there's sidebars. Larry has said this or Carol has said that, just so when we're looking at the document, we can see those, and that could be a kicking off point at the next meeting.
So do you have, or could we have a version without all of, I know the graphics are important and they're nice, but is there a version that's easier to redline? Or
Sure.
Google Doc? I'm guessing that's how you created
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, yeah. We could share that with you. And then I'll also share that, Denise and Rebecca represented the board on the committee. So, if any board members wanted to reach out to them, if you had certain questions or, anything, I'm sure that they would be willing to hear from you as well.
All right. Any other discussion or questions from the board right now? And it sounds like I think we've got a game plan for going into the 25th. So this is ongoing discussion. If we've got questions, we'll have plenty of opportunities to discuss those.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Olson.
You know,
All right.
I just want to,
Oh,
can
go
I
ahead,
just say
Denise.
something?
Sorry. Yep,
I just
yep.
want to publicly thank the committee. I think that really there were lots of viewpoints representing lots of different constituents that Eric put together. And I think for sure at the second meeting, a really working rhythm was established with that group. So really appreciated that. And the administration did a ton of work on this, the strategic plan. So all of their efforts, I think the board should appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the personnel report. Somebody want to make a motion on that?
All right, I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the personnel report dated February 11, 2021, noting that the personnel report is based on the recommendation of the superintendent and not upon the board's direct knowledge regarding any of the specific individuals selected for employment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks. Denise has the motion and Fred has the second. Joel and or Dr. Olson, anything you wanted to say? I have a feeling you might.
Yes, I'll turn it over to Joe.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're lucky to have Sarah Adelimbena with us tonight. She is going to be, we're looking to employ her as our .5 Assistant Director of Communications. And as I said, we'll turn this over to her in a second. She could just introduce herself. But Sarah has had the opportunity to work with several other school districts. She's done some work with Salt Creek School District. She did some COVID communications for Medina School District prior to coming here. And prior to that, she worked with, I think it was Alexi and Brothers on some of their communications. And as Dr. Olson had indicated earlier, we're looking for her from now till the end of the school year to really focus on a lot of those great stories that are happening throughout District 64, talking about the great things happening in the classrooms, the great works that teachers are doing, our teacher assistants, custodians, and really talking about the stories that make District 64 great. And I know she's got some projects I think her and Dr. Olson are already kind of working on, but we're happy to bring her forward tonight. We think she's going to do a tremendous job and really help to get those positive things out there to our community for the rest of this school year. So with that, I'll turn it over real quick, see if Dr. Olson has anything else to add. Otherwise, I'll give Sarah a moment just to introduce herself.
No, you did a great introduction, and I think Sarah is just drinking it all in right now. She's just continuing to, really understand District 64 and all of the nuances, and she's been pretty busy lately. So I've really appreciated her jumping right in and kind of going right off the bat. And we'll certainly have many, many, many stories to come from here. But I will turn it over to Sarah. We're very excited to welcome you. And do you have any words to share about coming to District 64?
Primarily, I'm just very excited to be a part of your district. I've been spending a lot of time meeting with some of your staff and principals this week in particular. And to compare it, it is like drinking water from a fire hose. There's a lot to absorb. So many wonderful things that are happening at the schools, even in this era of COVID, which is why I'm here to help to share those great stories and take some of the load off of some of the other staff members. So your district has been very welcoming, and it's evident that there's a terrific culture, and this community of Park Ridge is just fantastic. So I'm very, very excited to be on your team, and I'm here to really do the best I can to shine the light on some of the wonderful things that are happening within your district. So thank you again for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sarah.
Great. Does the board have any questions on the personnel report as presented? Okay. Anything from the public, Natasha or Dr. Olson?
No.
Nothing.
Okay, we'll take a roll call vote.
Biagi,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Salas, yes, Sotos, Pearl,
Yes.
Riles,
Yes.
Little,
Yes.
motion carries.
So Sotos is yes as well.
Okay,
Sorry.
thanks, Don.
Okay, great. Welcome aboard, Sarah. All right, thank you. We are moving on to the consent agenda. Before we take the consent agenda, as I always ask, is there anything that needs to get peeled off? Any board members want anything removed from the consent agenda and voted on separately? Okay, we'll take a motion as presented.
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the consent agenda for February 11th, 2021, which includes bills, payroll, and benefits, approval of financial update for the period ending December 31st, 2020, second reading and approval of policies from Press 106, approval of hold or release of closed minutes, and audio closed recordings, none.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Denise has a second. Fred has the motion. Any discussion from the board on any of those agenda or consent agenda items? Okay, and anything from the public?
Nothing.
No.
Okay, take a vote.
Okay, Pearl,
Yes.
Biagi,
Yes.
Sotos, Sanchez,
Yes.
Little,
Yes.
Riles,
Abstain.
Sotos was
Salas.
present.
Okay. Salas, yes. So let's see, 1, 2, 3.
We have 5.
Motion carries.
Yep, great. All right, on to the approval of minutes. We have an action item on that as well. Somebody want to make the motion on that?
I move that the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 64, Park Ridge-Niles, Illinois, approve the minutes from the closed meeting on January 14th, 2021, and the regular meeting on January 14th, 2021.
Second.
You two have like all the motion, the move on to and second the whole night here. Great, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that from the board? Any changes, any corrections that need to be made that anyone's seen in those minutes? Okay, and comments from the public? None?
No.
None.
Okay, take a vote.
Okay, Salas, yes. Biagi,
Yes.
Sotos,
Present.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Pearl,
Yes.
Little,
Yes.
Riles,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Olson.
Yes, so as it does say in the agenda, our next regular meeting is March 11th. But as we've talked tonight, we do have a special meeting before that coming up on February 25th. I also just wanted to give the board an update on our kindergarten committee, our kindergarten exploration committee that is looking at the possibility of bringing full-day kindergarten to the district. We've started meeting with that group and we'll continue to meet with them throughout the rest of the school year. And right now we have the objective of coming to the board by June with a recommendation on the future of kindergarten in District 64. What we have explained to the committee is that while there are nuances that could be different in some of these options, we're really looking at three options. One option is that we stay with everything just how it is. The second option is that we do full day kindergarten and we do it at all the schools. And so we build on additions to all the schools in order to have full day. Or we have a kindergarten center where students that are full day would go to one location in the district. Just remember that in the state of Illinois, if you offer full day kindergarten, you have to offer a half day option for any parents that are interested. So even if we were to move to that, we still will have half day in District 64. The next meeting, we have Luann and Rick Patricia coming, because obviously whenever you're talking about these three choices, they're very easy to talk about until you bring up money. And then money has a significant impact on those decisions and where they're going to go. And so Luann and Rick are just going to explain in detail what the cost of each of those options would be and what we're really talking about in terms of building and construction and what we would need to be able to do this. So I'll continue to have updates for the board, but I just wanted you to know what some of the conversations have been so far.
Dr. Olson, can I just ask, is that conversation with Rick and Luann, is that also going to include what this board is, well, actually the previous board talked about with regard to potentially moving the administrative, the district offices, you know, and how that piece of the puzzle all fits together with full day kindergarten as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Anything else on?
Sorry, and then nothing else. Yeah.
Okay. No problem. All right. Business. I know Carol has something to bring up that's going to take a couple of minutes. So before I get to her, is there anyone else with any new business that they have? Okay, Carol, take it away.
Okay, so our next policy committee meeting is February 23rd at 2 p.m. It'll be virtual again. The info will be on the website. That's going to be a Tuesday, so that's a couple of days before our special meeting. We're going to be discussing policy 4:60 purchases and contracts, and that pandemic preparedness policy 4:180, based on what we discussed at our prior meeting. In addition to 4:60, I added to the agenda for discussion some related policies. Two of them we discussed before, which was the policy about our attorneys. The other one was about our architects, just because they're related. So there are a couple of other related policies that we should discuss. So one possibility, based on what happened at our, February 23rd meeting, is, this seems, it is probably going to turn into a larger undertaking. So we'll see though, but so for the March 11th agenda, I might want to add an item to create a special board committee just for purchases and contracts. And I know we're going through a lot right now, especially with the strategic plan, but that would, that should kind of be reviewed hand in hand with it. And so the one issue that spurred this discussion about 4:60 was the single source and sole source purchases. So, we do have the info. We have the City of Park Ridge Council Policy Statement 18. We also have background info from the CPS Board of Education, because they went through a huge, overhaul and a huge, review of what they do. So all of these things are related, and MJ and Luann, they did do a presentation. This is probably like 5 policy committee meetings ago. I don't know if, we'll talk to them later if they wanted to come on the 23rd, but it's going to be a larger undertaking than just slapping together something that looks like the Park Ridge, Council Policy Statement 18. So it could be an ongoing thing. And this is something where, possibly residents would want to be involved in this. I mean, because I know that, various board members have discussed all of these issues over the years and what do we do for contracts? And, every so often when it comes up, people have their little issues and complaints, but it would be good just to discuss all of these interrelated policies together and with, a committee that's interested in this. So if, everyone can come, it's an open meeting, it's virtual, so just show up on the 23rd.
So Carol, I mean, we can also put that as a potential agenda item on the February 25th meeting if you want, just, because the primary focus of that meeting is the strategic plan, but that conversation wouldn't be terribly long if it was just a matter of whether the board wants to put together a board committee. Otherwise, we can push it to the March 11th, either way.
We could, right? So, hey, Tony, so we would specifically have to describe that, right? Since it's a special meeting. Okay.
Yeah.
We could do that, so that's fine.
But it could be optional, so if for whatever reason you felt out of the policy meeting that we didn't want to do it, we just have it on the agenda, we scrap it that night if you weren't ready for it. So
okay, that works. That's fine.
Okay, so Dr. Olson, why don't we add that as a potential agenda or an agenda item with a, we could kick it at the last minute if need be.
Okay.
And then we can discuss it fully with the board that night. Okay, Thanks, Carol. All right, any other new business? All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? I heard Denise made the motion. Do I have a second? Rebecca, was that you? Yep, great. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, we'll take a roll call vote.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Little,
Yes.
Riles,
Yes.
Salas, yes. Sotos,
Yes.
Biaggi,
Yes.
Pearl.
Yes.
Motion carries. It's 9:20 p.m.
Great. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you all on the 25th.